It's probably not an overstatement to say that Hypixel Skyblock has been largely responsible for the recent success of Minecraft as a whole. Boasting up to 50,000 players at any given moment, it is inarguably very, very popular, with its players most likely making up a substantial portion of the total Minecraft player base. Not only that, but countless content creators have their roots in Skyblock, and many of them have gone on to do new and great things, expanding Minecraft's audience as well. It has inspired a whole new generation of Minecraft players, and I'll forever appreciate it for that. But I'm not here to talk about how great Skyblock is, some other nerd can go and do that. I'm here to complain about all the ways in which it has begun to go wrong over its many years, and believe me, there are a lot. Even more than that, I want to look into the ways that it can maybe start to fix itself and begin yet another era of Minecraft. Before any of that though, obvious disclaimer. I have no real evidence to back any of this up. I'm literally just some guy with opinions, and this video represents those opinions alone. So take everything I say with a grain of salt and feel free to draw your own conclusions. If you end up enjoying this video, help others find it by liking and leaving a comment. I'm currently in a kind of weird, transitional and experimental period, so I'll take any and all feedback very seriously. With all of that out of the way, it's time to take a moment to reflect. How did Skyblock go wrong? Well, to answer that, we first need to ask, how did Skyblock go right? Skyblock was released to the Hypixel prototype lobby on June 11th, 2019, a date which is actually completely irrelevant because I wasn't playing the game at that point. Luckily for this video, the early game of Skyblock is actually pretty much the same now as it was then, so we can just use the early game experience to represent the original intention of the game. New players will spend their time exploring, farming, fighting monsters, and acquiring better tools, weapons, and armor. These tasks are actually important to late game players as well, but what's unique about this early stage of Skyblock is how cohesive and centralized it is. This cohesiveness, as far as I can tell, is because of the system of skills and collections. Almost every activity an early game player can do relates to one of 5 main skills: farming, fishing, foraging, combat, and mining. Each of these skills have a set of collections attached to them, which allow players to unlock new recipes by collecting a specific item. For example, by killing zombies and collecting rotten flesh, a player can progress their rotten flesh collection, unlocking various crafting recipes which use the rotten flesh they collected along the way. Each of these 5 skills even have their own islands, except fishing, rib fishing, which have things to help the players farm the skills, like the barn, a farming island which is filled with crop fields and animal spawners. These elements combine to form a simple gameplay loop. Work to collect an item, to level up the skill and collection associated with it, to be able to craft better equipment and farm items faster, to level up further, and so on. It's simple, yes, it's repetitive, absolutely, but it's really, really engaging. It has just enough variety with the different skills to keep it from devolving into complete, mindless grinding, but it's still simple enough that there's always a clear path of progression. Progression in any one skill will also make the other ones easier to farm, so you have the freedom to do whatever you like, but diversity is encouraged through unique items that are unlocked from only one specific collection. They even block off some areas of each island until certain skill milestones are met, to ensure that there's always a sense of excitement and exploration associated with progress. I'm not trying to claim that the early game is perfect, of course. I think that the addition of minions, who are unpaid, volunteers who collect items for you when you're offline, actually undermines the value in grinding for items on your own. I also even think that a lot of the later updates have actually added a lot of meaningful and enjoyable content, and that the growth of the game has, in some ways at least, been a good thing. But if you're looking to imagine how great I found the early game, just consider this. On my first day playing Skyblock, I was happy. No, I was excited to be chopping wood. Think about that for a second. This game took the least exciting part of Minecraft and made me actively enjoy doing it. I mean, come on, dude. If their formula can make me enjoy chopping trees, there's no way they could mess it up. Feature creep is the excessive ongoing expansion or addition of new features in a product, and can result in software bloat and overcomplication rather than simple design. There are a lot of ways that a software project can go wrong. Out of all of them though, feature creep is maybe the most insidious. It often, well, creeps up on a project. It can even seem like a good thing at first. I mean, more features equals good, right? Well, I encourage you to consider perhaps the most famous example of feature creep, a game called Yandere Simulator. Yandere Simulator is a game about... On second thought, it doesn't really matter what it's about. The point here is that the first iteration of the game was released in 2014, and now, 7 years later, the main objective of the game still hasn't been implemented yet. It's not even that the game has been abandoned, it's been updated pretty regularly, but the developer refuses to focus on what really matters and instead constantly starts working on new aspects of the game only to move on before they're really finished. The result is a game which is incredibly expansive, but at the same time, unbelievably shallow. It has a ton of game modes and ways to do the things that you do in this game, but none of it matters because there's not even a real objective yet. Does any of this remind you of a certain game, perhaps one even mentioned in the title of this video? Well, actually, it probably shouldn't, honestly. Yandere Simulator's development was a complete dumpster fire, and it's not really fair to compare it to Skyblock. The Skyblock developers have at least been attentive enough to finish most of what they start. There are undoubtedly some holes here and there, like the fact that several collection items still don't exist, or, the countless bugs in the game. But for the most part, there are relatively few unfinished features. The bigger issue with Skyblock is that they keep recklessly adding new features without considering the impact those features could have on the game experience. See, they put out a new major update nearly every month. I used to wonder why every company didn't do this. I mean, after all, how long can it take to design, program, and make art for new content? It often seemed to me like companies should be able to put out content all the time. But the truth is, I'm guessing that most studios actually spend most of their time planning, testing, and redesigning the new content to make sure it fits in with the already existing game. Consider actual Minecraft updates. We're lucky if we get one a year, and that's because they spend so much time just tweaking things and making sure they feel natural. As a result, even a small content patch can take months to develop. Skyblock, on the other hand, gets such big and frequent updates that they don't have time to go through that process. That's how we end up with the original parts of Skyblock, like skills and collections, squashed together with dungeons and slayers and seasonal events and Jacob's farming festivals and the Dwarven mines and social minigames and dark auctions and probably many more things that I'm still forgetting. I actually love most of these things on their own, but when they're all put together, it starts to make the game feel messy. Each individual experience starts to feel diluted, and the tight gameplay that made the early game so special just dissipates entirely. Suddenly, the entire game just feels like a collection of fringe gameplay elements, none of which really seem to be central to the experience. Now, that could be okay. After all, a collection of enjoyable activities can still be, well, enjoyable, if not as impactful as one cohesive experience. But there's another issue which haunts the experiences themselves, an issue which has crept on Skyblock since the very beginning. The issue I'm talking about, of course, is grinding. Okay, wait, before you start doubting me here, I want to stress that I don't actually have a problem with the grinding itself. I thought about taking the video in a different direction and just complaining that there was so much grinding in general, but I realized that's kind of the point. Skyblock was always intended to involve large amounts of repetitive work, and that's actually perfectly okay. When done right, grinding games can be extremely fun and rewarding. But it's difficult to do right, and I think that Skyblock falls short in a few ways. Here, I want you to consider this completely 100% hypothetical scenario. Imagine a game with a difficult endgame boss, like, say, a dragon. Now suppose that this dragon drops really good loot, but in order to summon the dragon you need to collect a bunch of items, like, theoretically, an eyeball. And collecting that item is very time consuming. Well, those two elements suggest a fairly standard process. Grind to collect the eyes, fight the dragon, hope for good loot, and repeat. Probably a bit tedious at times, but most likely at least fairly satisfying when the loot is finally dropped. Pretty good. But what if we add another element to this, again, completely imaginary scenario, like a market or, I don't know, a bazaar? This bazaar will enable players to exchange the summoning eyes for money, and then use enough of that money to just buy the good loot from the dragons. Suddenly the cycle becomes completely stale for everyone, except for the bazaar agent. He keeps making that sweet tax money. See, now, some people grind perpetually to get the summoning eyes. They never get to experience the excitement of dragon loot. When they finally make enough money to buy good loot, that's all it is, it's just a purchase, it's not an exciting drop. On the other hand, people wealthy enough to actually be able to profit off of the dragon fights have the fun boss fight just turned into another chore. These lucky drops just mean a slight boost in cash rather than an actually exciting occurrence. The fights themselves even stop being interesting since they do so many fights at one time. Pretty bad. Well, in case it's obvious, I've just completely bamboozled you. I hate myself for saying that. This hypothetical scenario is actually almost exactly what is the real case in Skyblock. Summoning eyes are nothing more than a money source for most players, and most players also just acquire their dragon gear by buying it off the auction house. This isn't just unique to dragon fights either. I mean, virtually everything in Skyblock has become about making money so you can just buy better gear. This means that almost no one needs to actually experience the satisfaction of obtaining better gear on your own. It also takes away the variety that I praised from the early game. See, in early game, you spend time going around and leveling up different collections and skills, thus giving the game some amount of variety, but later on, players don't need to grind in different ways, they just find an effective way to make money and spend hours doing that alone. Now, I can almost hear you guys, but what about skills? You have to grind those individually. And that's true, skills can only be grinded by doing a specific task rather than just obtaining money as quickly as possible. While this does provide some incentive to do different kinds of grinding, the biggest issue is that grinding skills is almost completely boring and useless. The stat improvements that you gain from leveling skills are so small for the amount of work needed to get them that only the most dedicated players go for it. The only, in my opinion, interesting milestones, the recipes from collections, are made completely obsolete by the fact that almost everything from them can just be bought from the auction house, usually for barely more than the cost of their ingredients. Luckily, some of the latest updates have been adding on to the usefulness of skills, especially for late game players. While this is definitely a big improvement and I hope that it signals a good direction for the game going forward, there is still the major issue that these new additions often feel completely out of place with the other parts of the game, therefore, feature creep. But still, it is progress. And speaking of progress, I have been complaining for way too long, so I am going to progress right into the solution, huh? See what I did there? I know I've already given one stupid disclaimer in this video, but I feel like this section is so subjective that it needs another one. For the previous sections, at least I had the experience of playing the game to inform my thoughts on the matter, but when it comes to giving suggestions for the actual development of the game, I'm kind of completely blind because, I don't develop Skyblock. So with that being said, let's try to talk fixes. The bigger problem out of the two that I mentioned is the feature creep, but I think that the grinding has a much simpler and easier fix than the feature creep does, so let's start with that. Now, as a reminder, I don't actually have a problem with Skyblock being heavy on grinding, that's kind of the point. I only have an issue with the economy of Skyblock that encourages players to simply grind for money, a task which is much more boring than searching for unique gear on your own. Now, the obvious solution would be to just remove the auction house and bazaar entirely, but believe it or not, I don't think that's actually a good choice. Not only would it cause massive backlash from the players, it would also make progression unreasonably difficult. At this point, the game has been built around the auction house, and I can live with that. I do think, however, that there should be more soul-bound items, or items that cannot be traded or sold. This is actually something a lot of RPGs have. Many late-game or rare items are often soul-bound, so that players have to get them on their own. In Skyblock, these soul-bound items could be central to gameplay like weapons or armor, or they could even be more fringe items like accessories. It doesn't really matter what exactly they are, there just needs to be more incentive to grind for items on your own. Once again, it's worth pointing out that they've done this here and there in the newest updates, with many of the special farming tools from Jacob's farming festivals and the mining buffs from the Dwarven mines being essentially soul-bound. Hopefully they'll start implementing that kind of idea in other parts of Skyblock as well. And so we arrive at the central problem: feature creep. Before anything else, we need to recognize that Hypixel, as a Minecraft server, is in a very unique situation which to some extent forces them into feature creep. Just consider this. Most game developers can make a game, release it, and then forget about it if they want. People will buy the game, the developer makes some money, and then they move on. Skyblock, on the other hand, has very high running costs. Minecraft servers are quite expensive to run, so the admins need to keep the players engaged at any cost. If they take their time with their updates and only put one out every few months, people will stop playing, and pretty soon Hypixel will start losing money. So just telling Hypixel to make fewer updates is kind of useless advice. The solution needs to somehow reconcile frequent updates with a simple and cohesive game. In order to do that, I think what they need to do is build up more than what they build out. Imagine a game like a tree. A good game tree is well pruned and supported by the features that come before it. On the other hand, a bad game tree can look one of two ways. It can be too narrow, with simplistic and unchanging gameplay elements that get old fast, or it can be too wide, with messy and conflicting gameplay elements that confuse players and, perhaps unintuitively, also get old fast. Skyblock, of course, leans more towards the latter of those two archetypes, with nearly every update adding in new branches of content. I really think that they could afford to just expand upon the already existing ideas and honestly push the boundaries a little bit less. For example, if we go back to my apparently favorite part of this game, the collections, they could just add some late game collection recipes. That would provide players with an incentive to keep grinding for resources, but it wouldn't change the game in any kind of dramatic and potentially problematic way. Doing stuff like that would allow the game's scope to grow at a more manageable pace, while still providing plenty to do for players and content creators alike. Maybe if they work like that, they could even regain the cohesive experience that made the early game so special. So, those are my thoughts on Hypixel Skyblock. I've spent a probably unhealthy amount of time thinking about them, so I hope I backed them up as well as I can. Everyone will have very different opinions though, so let me know if you disagree with anything I've said. Once again, this is a very different video from what I normally do, and I may or may not do something like it again, depending on how long it ends up taking to make and how much people seem to like it. If you did enjoy it, just consider subscribing. It honestly helps me a lot, and it also lets me know that you liked this video, and so I'll be more likely to do it again. So, as always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.